today we're going to be making mini sourdough pumpkin loaves. Now, this is an experiment. I've actually, in fact, never done the mini loaves, so what better time than to do it with my friends here on the internet. But I have made a sourdough pumpkin loaf with just one loaf of sourdough, and this is really fun to do seasonally. In the fall time, it makes a beautiful tablescape, and it also just makes your food really appealing, right? We eat with our eyes, we hear that all the time, but it's so true. And so I love to visually create things, especially as we're transitioning into fall and winter. It's when we're just really getting cozy, and I really just want to make cozy, beautiful food. But I've never turned these into small miniature loaves, which is what I'm actually going to attempt to do today. So I'm obviously kind of altering how many loaves I'm making. I just doubled my batch that I usually make. So I doubled my batch, which would have originally created 2 large loaves of sourdough, and I've broken it up into 6 small pumpkin loaves, fingers crossed. And we'll also have to just alter the bake time. So it's one of those things I'm really just going to be keeping an eye on my sourdough, but they're obviously not going to take as long to bake. So it's kind of an experiment we're going to do together. I started my dough last night. I let it bulk ferment overnight, which is the perfect schedule for us busy moms, because then it can do all the work while we're sleeping and we do not have to worry about it. So I love that schedule. And then when I woke up this morning, my dough had doubled. It was nice and fluffy and beautiful. And so we're just moving into shaping them and moving on to that second proof. So after this is where I'll show you guys how to make that fun pumpkin design. It's actually way easier than you might think. We'll score it, pop it in the oven, and let them bake. And so my idea is to use these little miniature loaves as kind of the bowl for a soup that I plan on making for dinner tomorrow night. And so it's nice to kind of have my bread done beforehand. I'll just be real honest with you guys. It's pretty rare that I can have a beautiful loaf, something that is this intricate, the same night as dinner, unless it's a focaccia. And so when I'm kind of experimenting with something like this, I like to bake the bread the day before, just so if it didn't work out and I need to throw together a quick focaccia or something like that, we haven't really ruined our dinner plans, if that makes sense. So typically focaccia is what I'm making. It's so easy to get done. I can bake it in a day, and that is usually always fresh with dinner. But I thought for these little sourdough bread bowls, a soup would be perfect. So maybe a broccoli and cheddar soup. Maybe we'll do a loaded baked potato soup. I've kind of got to scour the pantry and see what ingredients we have, and that'll determine. But the weather is beautiful here. Fall has officially welcomed its way. We are really excited about that. So with the welcoming of fall, I really like to get cozy. I like to create beautiful food and just really kind of create those memories for my family. So that's what we're making today, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. What a better way to spend this Friday than cozy up in the kitchen baking with some of my favorite internet friends. So first of all, just thank you guys. I absolutely I think revel so often in the fact that I get to share my life with you guys, and it looks like this. It looks like beautiful, cozy homemaking. I remember a time in my life where it did not look like this at all. My days were hectic, they were crammed packed, and I was just living that grind, that hustle that so many times we either get caught up in ourselves or maybe we see other people doing. And I don't know, it just, as I was editing this video, I thought, wow, man, have my Fridays changed from what they used to be, and what a joy. So first of all, if you find yourself spending your Friday afternoon with me as we are just diving into cooking from scratch and baking bread, thank you. Grab your cup of coffee. I'm glad you guys joined me. So you can see here, I have just turned these pumpkin loaves into the bannetons to proof. I will have the recipe for this down below, but do not let all these strings intimidate you. Try something new. I encourage you this weekend, try something new in the kitchen, whether it's a new recipe, whether it's a sourdough loaf. I'll put a few different resources I have for you guys down below as far as some easy recipes to get started. But I love making these every single year because the girls just think that these pumpkin loaves are the cutest thing ever, and they really are. I will say the first time I made it, the strings and everything like that, I had to watch a few YouTube tutorials myself, but once I got the hang of it, it became so simple, and these are so fun. So I'm actually going to be making a lot of these for our Thanksgiving dinner, but it was fun to kind of play around with these for the recipe I have. So if you guys want to catch the full recipe for this, the full video tutorial, make sure you just click the link in my description, and that'll walk you step by step through how to do it. But I really encourage you to play around with all of the different things that you put in it. I did add pumpkin puree because I just canned some pumpkin puree. If you caught the video I just recently put out a couple weeks ago, but you can just make a standard loaf of bread with this, or you can get super creative and festive for Thanksgiving, or if you're gonna alter this a little bit, there's other fun shapes and such you can do for Christmas. But I just want to chat with you guys about cooking from scratch for your large family, even if you don't have a large family. I will say I've just recently entered into this large family era, and so I'm trying to figure out, how do I still cook from scratch for my family when it takes forever? And when I chat with friends, I chat with family, that is always their response of, I don't know how you cook from scratch, it takes so much time. And I feel like this was always the case for me too. And I feel like part of that was because I just wasn't familiar with cooking. I had to do everything based off of a recipe. I really wasn't just comfortable with grabbing ingredients from my kitchen and just experimenting. And so that added a level of stress, if you will. But I will say, as I've become more comfortable in the kitchen, it's really made cooking from scratch so much easier. Now I'm going to break real quick, give you guys one of my best pro tips if you're making this myself, and then I'll pop back in and share with you guys my tips for cooking from scratch, no matter your family size. If you're just cooking from scratch and it's just you and your spouse, if you're cooking from scratch and you've got 1 kid, 3 kids, 5 kids, etc., I'm hoping what I have to share is going to help you even in the slightest bit, because it truly has been a game changer for me with finding joy with baking from scratch and cooking from scratch, and just eliminating the overwhelm that so often is associated when you tend to bake and cook this type of way. All right, so a little pro tip. Typically, I'm letting my bread cool in the Dutch oven before I'm ever taking it out and messing with it. However, I only have 2 Dutch ovens and 6 loaves of bread. So one, I'm having to move these loaves out onto a baker's rack just to be able to bake the other loaves. But I went ahead and I cut the strings when they were hot. You guys, this is a game changer. So I have tried to let my bread completely cool before I actually take the strings off, and they stick. You get little particles of that twine left in your loaf. It's just not enjoyable at all. So there are a few things you can do. You can actually coat your string in some sort of oil. I've done this before. I do not prefer this method. It's very messy, unnecessarily messy, I will say. And so I just don't love that. And so I found if you actually cut the strings when the loaf is still hot, they slide off with ease. So I really recommend you guys doing that. But I would love to know in the comments, have you made this pumpkin sourdough loaf? And if you haven't, do you plan on making it? I love making this every year because, one, I can make this with just my standard artisan loaf and still make it the pumpkin shape, and it feels super festive. The kids absolutely love it, which I'll put my recipe for this down below. This one I did actually put pumpkin puree in, and so it's just got that nice fall flavor. But this is so versatile because while I am using this as a savory loaf, you could easily make it as a sweet loaf. So you could add seasonal nuts, things that make you think about that fall holiday. You could add macadamia nuts and white chocolate chips. You could add cinnamon, clove, pumpkin pie spice. You could easily make this a dessert loaf, which I think would be really, really fun as well. I am home by myself at the moment with the little one, of course, which is a little rare. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead while I have some time, baby's snoozing, I'm gonna go ahead and make the soup for tomorrow. And so I thought, you know what, I went ahead and prepped the bread. That's super easy. I can go ahead and just make the soup and we can reheat it tomorrow for dinner. And then that's just gonna allow me to not be stressed about needing to be home at a certain time to get dinner done. And so I decided to go ahead and make a broccoli and cheddar soup because it is so easy with the most humble ingredients: onions, garlic, broccoli. We've got a lot of fresh carrots on the farm right now, so I'm going to be adding in fresh carrots. You really can, as long as you have the base of broccoli and cheese, you can kind of make it a pantry sink soup dish, which is what I love, because we can kind of raid the fridge, figure out what sort of root veggies do we have, throw them in there. It makes it a great option. So we're gonna get busy chopping this stuff up and make some broccoli and cheddar soup. So one of the ways I have embraced from scratch cooking, and I am able to make delicious fall recipes like what you see here without the overwhelm, is a lot of what I just said. I am choosing to take humble ingredients that we are, either grown ourselves from the summer garden, maybe that's in the fall garden, and I'm not making it complicated. I feel like when I started to learn how to cook, I found the most intricate, complicated recipes on the internet, and no wonder I felt so discouraged when they took hours and hours to make and they just didn't turn out that great. And so what I have really kind of tapped into in the last year is just taking those humble ingredients, taking those pantry staples and turning them into nourishing food. And what I found is sometimes those casseroles or the broccoli and cheddar soup like what I'm making now, although it's not anything super fancy, my family loves that. And I was starting to ask myself, well, why is that? And it's because it's comforting. It's because it was made with love. It's because there's ingredients in there that my kids helped me grow out in the garden, that they helped me harvest. And so I really encourage you guys, if you want to start baking and cooking from scratch, do it, because it is so much more nourishing. You know the ingredients that you're putting in a recipe. I can jump down that rabbit trail another time on another day and talk about the importance of cooking from scratch and just knowing what's in your ingredients that you're using for your meals. But for me, using those humble ingredients, simplifying it, not feeling like I need to make the most intricate recipe, really made from scratch cooking doable for me as a busy mom. Now, one of the things I have heard pretty much my whole life, but have never really taken into consideration until I started spending more time in the kitchen, and that is this little piece of advice to clean as you go. This has been a game changer for me, just as far as wanting to be in the kitchen. And something I've actually been doing is putting my kitchen to rest at night, or putting my kitchen to bed. And it has brought me so much joy, because when I wake up in the morning and I'm ready to have my hot cup of tea or maybe my cup of coffee, I don't want to feel flustered and overwhelmed by how messy and chaotic the kitchen is from the night before. And so I love recipes like soup, or where I have to, saute the onions or something like that, because I've got about 20 minutes that I'm just letting this soup simmer, really cooking the broccoli, the carrots, things like that, before I add the cheese, and then I'm just going to kind of turn it off. And so this is a great opportunity for me to clean up the mess that I've just made, and then I don't feel super overwhelmed by the time I get done. By the time I get done, I have a very small mess to clean up, and then my kitchen is essentially put to rest, and I can welcome it in the morning with open arms, knowing that I'm not going to have to spend the first hour of my day cleaning, because trust me, friends, there is nothing worse. So, take my advice that I've been given for years and years and years and never took until recently. Clean as you go. Put your kitchen to rest at night. Trust me, you will feel so much better. So I would love to hear from you in the comments. What is one of those homemaking hacks you can share with me and anyone else? Kind of like this, putting your kitchen to bed. I've heard that forever, but when I actually applied it, you guys, it literally brought me so much life. So if you're hanging on to one of those homemaking hacks that you can share with me and the rest of us, go ahead and do me a favor, press pause and put them down in the comments below. But I wanted to share one more tip with you before I go. If you're wanting to cook from scratch, nourishing meals, here is something I learned that has been life-giving. Do not feel like you have to do it all the same day. So I mentioned here, I actually made my bread the day before we served it, as well as the broccoli and cheddar soup. So if you can make sourdough at the beginning of the week to have throughout the week for your meals, or you can make ahead some soups, chilies, stews, crock pot meals, and they're from scratch and they're nourishing, you guys, take that win, especially if you are just trying to start cooking from scratch. But if I were to have made this, broccoli and cheddar soup and the sourdough the day of, I would have been in the kitchen all day and honestly probably stressed out. So figure out what you can prep ahead, make the day before, pop on the stove or in the crock pot, and I promise you, you'll thank me later. See you next week.